Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sankirtan ki jai, Gaura Premanandi. Wondering where devotees are. Talk to Alex. Talk to Jimmy. Maybe you could call Alex. Okay, Google. So today we're reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 7 of Canto 3. We made it all the way to text 30. The further inquiries by Vidura with Maitreya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamutirayat Nastaprayashtabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Today's verse 30, which let's see if I can put it on the board. Oh no, a different network. No. I have Chromecast. As long as the internet works. Yagnasya chavitanani yogasya chapata prabhu naishkarmyasya cha sankhasya tantram va bhagavat smritam yagnasya chavitanani yogasya chapatak prabhu naishkarmyasya cha sankhasya tantram va bhagavat smritam yagnasya cha vitanani yogasya chapata prabhu naishkarmyasya cha sankhasya tantram va bhagavat smritam. Holy yasya cha vitanani yogasya cha pratak prabhu naishkarmyasya cha sankhasya tantram va bhagavat smritam. Yagyasya cha vitanani Yogyasya chapata Prabhu. Naiskarmyasya cha sankasya tantram va bhagavat smritam yajnasya cha vitanani yogasya cha patah Prabhu. Naiskarmyasya cha sankasya tantram va bhagavat smritam. Vaishnabis. Yajnasya shatvitanani yogasya cha patah Prabhu. Naishkarmasya cha sankasya Om Jnanatimurandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamai Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagra Jatam Sagana Raghunavitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Pitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhubheva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhagum Mangayate Girim Yatripatam Aham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Before um, speaking on this shloka of the Bhagavatam, I would like to request the blessings of all the senior devotees, especially Tulsi Prabhu and my god brother Nityanand Kishore Prabhu back there. So thank you, Prabhu. And so we'll go to the synonyms. Yagyasya of sacrifices. Cha also. Vitanani extensions. Yogasya of mystic powers. Cha also. Prata ways. Prabhu, O my Lord. Naishkarmasya of knowledge. Cha and Sankhasya Sankhasya of analytical studies. Tantram, path of devotional service. Ba, as well as Bhagavat, in relation with the personality of Godhead. Smitam, regulative principles. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Translation with repetition. Please also describe the expansions of different sacrifices and the paths of mystic powers, analytical study of knowledge, and devotional service, all with their respective regulations. Please also describe the expansions of different sacrifices and the paths of mystic powers, analytical study of knowledge, and devotional service, all with their respective regulations. I probably should have done that in a different order, but no problem. So, purport. The word tantram is significant here. Sometimes tantram is misunderstood to be the black spiritual science of materialistic persons engaged in sense gratification. But here, tantram means the science of devotional service compiled by Srila Narada Muni. One can take advantage of such regulative explanations of the path of devotional service and make progressive advancement in the devotional service of the Lord. Sankhya philosophy is the basic principle of acquiring knowledge, as will be explained by the sage Maitreya. The Sankhya philosophy enunciated by Kapiladev, the son of Devahuti, is the real source of knowledge about the supreme truth. Knowledge not based on the Sankhya philosophy is mental speculation and can yield no tangible profit. Yagnasya cha vitanani yogasya cha patak prabhu naishkarmyasya cha sankasya tantram va bhagavat smritam. So the first thing that comes to mind when I was reading through that is Bhagavat Smritam. That we're reading right now, we're reading one of the Smriti Shastras, the Bhagavat Purana. And it's different from the Shrutis. So the Shrutis means what is heard, Smritam means what is remembered. So the Shrutis are all very advanced technical Sanskrit that has to be pronounced perfectly if you're doing some sort of ritual with it. And with the science of knowing how to do it perfectly, it produces so many different, uh, essentially, to our point of view, at least in the modern day, it would seem magical and mystical, like a cow gets sacrificed or a horse and then immediately comes back, or you know, something's happening where all these amazing things happens. Whereas the Smritis, and if even if you get one word wrong, you say the grammar in Sanskrit a little bit wrong, it changes the whole jagya and all the energy gets put differently. One big example is that of Vritrasura. He they they wanted to make a sacrifice to kill Indra, but the demon that they summoned to kill Indra, they said who Indra was the enemy of, not who was the enemy of Indra. And there was some funny small grammatical mistake that then somehow whoever's has the job of interpreting the curses and making them manifest, he, he made it such that the demon that would be manifest would actually be killed by Indra. And then we get the epic pastime of the battle between all the demigods and Vritrasura. Indra ends up cutting his arms off, and then his mouth gets so big, he just swallows Indra up. But because Indra has the Narayan Kavacha, he's not killed by it, and he's able to get out. And he has the lightning weapon that was made from the bones of Tadichi. And even with such a powerful weapon, it takes him a whole year to cut off the head of Vritrasura. But in the meantime, Vritrasura is similar to Shukadev Goswami, or similar to Parikshit Maharaj. Before he gets killed, he was actually already in Samadhi, so he had left his body, and that was one reason also why his neck became so hard. Um, Whereas also Parikshit Maharaj, before he was actually bitten by the snake bird, he was already back to Godhead, so he didn't even feel it. And that's one main difference of death between a devotee and a regular person. Like a cat will treat a mouse and its kitten differently. So the cat of death treats a mouse-like person, just ripping them to shreds. They have such a terrible experience. Um, anyone that's worked in a hospital or somewhere with a lot of old people that are always dying, sometimes they get uh, like right before they're about to die, they become completely terrified. It's like a medically documented thing. Um, Whereas a devotee, the death, the cat of death approaches it like a kitten. Um, you get all these amazing stories of devotees that we hear when they're passing, how they're passing in different ways, and hearing about these pastimes can give one a lot of faith. So that's one difference between the Shrutis and the Smritis. The Smriti Shastras is just remembrance. It doesn't matter if you don't even have a single verse of Bhagavatam memorized, or if you have the verses that you know, you're not pronouncing it right. It matters that you remember the information that is in there, which is the the, the information is it's simple and it's sublime. Krishna is the personality of Godhead. You serve him, and that'll make you satisfied. If you don't remember Savai Pumso Pro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Dokshajaya Hoitakiya Pratiyataya Yatma Suprasidati. Even if you don't remember that, and I probably wasn't even chanting it according to the strict, you know, meter or anything like that. You still can get the complete full benefit of going back to Godhead. You don't need to be uh, some sort of great scholar. And it's even said in the Bhagavatam, those verses which are, even if they're irregularly composed, if they're glorifying the Lord, then wise men, they take relish in them. Um, Whereas other verses, even if they're completely perfectly composed and everything's so poetic and amazing, if they're not actually talking about it, then they're just useless, like a place of pilgrimage of crows, which means a garbage dump. I didn't really realize that until I went to India and we went to visit um, Radha Desh. We went to visit the birthplace of Lord Nityananda, and we were visiting Mayapur. We took a bus over there, and we were like taking our prasad, and then there was the garbage pile that we threw everything, and it was kind of hidden in such a way so there wasn't many monkeys around that area. I noticed, and there wasn't many dogs. Normally in India, you see a lot of monkeys and dogs, and this garbage pile was also kind of like blocked off by a wall, and so it wasn't. It was kind of hard to access from the outside. But then, as soon as we threw all our stuff, you saw the crows come in. That they were trying to get all the garbage, which is good for them. They're getting the prasadam and remnants from the devotees, plus the crows that live in the dam. So it must have some sort of special benefit. Who knows? Maybe even they're like special sages that are just subsisting off that as their sadhana. But anyways, that's what the Bhagavatam is trying to criticize. That it's basically garbage if it's not in relationship with devotional service with the Lord. Because as we're hearing in this verse, there's different kinds of sacrifices. There's paths of mystic power, Shankya, and ultimately devotional service. Um, so how did we? I guess sometimes in the Bhagavatam has a certain flow, and so how did we get to this? This is like a whole section, basically until the end of the seventh chapter. We have like maybe 10 more verses or something, and they're all just questions that Vidura is asking Maitreya. Um, basically what's happened in the third canto so far is that Vidura was going, he met Uddhava, and they discussed like a whole summary of the Lord's pastimes and were like crying in separation, and it was like very intense. And Uddhava wanted Vidura to actually talk with Maitreya because he didn't want there to be the aparad of Guru Druha, of going over the Guru, of over someone that's more senior. Um, and so Uddhava then following, I mean, Maitreya, Vidura, following Uddhava's instructions, then traveled and met Maitreya. And so at first, Vidura asked Maitreya about all kinds of questions about the material world. How is it created? How does it work? What is, the demigods and all these different things. And these questions were elementary topics, which are definitely below the Adhikar. Like Vidura could have asked, anyway, Uddhava had asked Vidura to specifically talk to Maitreya and ask him about the pastimes of the Lord and the qualities of the Lord and directly about the Lord. But Vidura starts off with indirectly asking all these things related to the Lord. Um, and in one of the purports, he's saying Prabhupada's saying not for himself, but for the common man, the benefit of the common man. And similarly, even the whole Bhagavatam, which is just like a conversation with Parikshit and Shukadev, he's Shukadev and Parikshit Maharaj could have immediately gone to talking about the 10th canto, but because for the benefit of all the people there and for eventually all the people of the world that would eventually read Bhagavatam, which by Srila Prabhupada's grace is becoming millions and billions, so many have the chance to do that, that they go through the progressive march from the first canto through 9 cantos, explaining, like, at least giving us a frame of reference so that we can actually appreciate and understand properly Krishna's position in the 10th canto, which is extremely important because people just go straight to the 10th canto. They they just got off the phone with their girlfriend and then they did read the 10th canto. They just think it's Krishna's the same guy. This is some guy like me. He just has his he just has he's just more ideal. Like if I could get Krishna's position, that would be better. Like yeah, and like a wonderful forest area with all these like maidens that like I can attract them from their husbands. Okay, great. That's a great story. I like hearing that. So they might get uh, thrown more into Maya and more bound, and they don't understand that. Oh, actually, Krishna, he's actually the creator of everything. He's actually the enjoyer of everything. He's actually my best friend. I should actually do service towards him. And what I'm hearing about, I'm not hearing about some simple pastimes between girls and boys. I'm hearing about, you know, Radharani, who is praised by great sages like the Sanat Kumaras or the four Kumaras, who they all wanted to be eternal brahmacharis, and so many sannyasis and renunciates and monks, they're always trying to hear and glorify and serve these personalities. It's nothing like mundane sex or anything like that. But if you don't understand the first nine cantos, you won't get that understanding, and you you're the lust in the heart that's preventing us from actually ultimately joining those pastimes will never get uh, put out with that mentality. Um, and so therefore, Vidura is asking so many more elementary questions to give people a frame of reference for if he for when he starts talking about the pastimes, because it's very important. And that's also why you hear Prabhupada in most of his classes, he doesn't go directly into talking about uh, Krishna. He's always first, who are you? You're not your body. And that's like, you have to constantly, like, I like when Pancharatna Prabhu gives class um, to the new people, because he kind of gauges the room where people are at. And usually he always just says, okay, wherever we're going, we first have to establish this. So you're not your body, you're a spirit soul, it's eternal. And so that people can have a more uh, better frame of mind, because through through our understanding, if we don't understand our situation, if the language that we use is not suitable, which over time language gets less and less suitable. People used to all speak Sanskrit, Devanagari, and they could, it's like Sanskrit's related so closely with how the universe is manifested. They whatever the Brahmins especially, whatever they would say would just come into being. And now it's slowly getting degraded in every language which has come from Sanskrit. You can see also that, like, you look at English, hundreds of years ago, it was very much more eloquent, and the people, at least the people that knew how to speak English, were extremely elegant. But now it's getting degraded, more slang words, more different variations, which just have less ability to speak. So the people have less ability to understand their situation. It's just the language is forcing them to be more material. Um, so they need to be elevated. And so then Vidura is asking these questions, and this leads to Maitreya explaining about some prayers of the demigods, which they're praying to the Lord. These are like the last few chapters. And um, the demigods are praying to the Lord because they need empowerment, actually. Um, they're not the ultimate controllers. They want some control, but these prayers are nice because they kind of highlight how everyone's actually dependent on the Lord at every single step. So Um, chapter 6 describes how the Lord creates the world from the pradhan and the modes, and everything's expanding. And we recently heard about all this. And Prabhupada says in one purport that I specifically like explain the purpose of all this. It says all these actions have a divine plan behind them. The plan is to give conditioned souls who so desire a chance to enjoy sense gratification. But there's another plan behind this creation. So many conditioned souls, the reason that they're conditioned is because they think they're the enjoyer. They think they deserve and should have sense gratification. So Krishna doesn't directly disagree with them. He gives them a chance to try it. Um, but the real plan behind this creation is to help them realize that they are created for the transcendental sense gratification of the Lord, not for their individual sense gratification. Because we're all parts and parcels of Krishna. We want to enjoy, because Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer. But the problem is we just don't know how we should enjoy. We think we should enjoy like the Lord. But the thing is, we're part and parcel of the Lord. We're not identical with the Lord. We're not Vishnu Tattva expansion. Um, we're an infinitesimal expansion. And the common example is like your hand. Probably said, if you just cut off your hand and it's just laying there, how is it going to get any proper nutrients? Um, if the hand wants to work for itself and not work with the stomach, then it's silly. And so Krishna is like giving him this ridiculous, this he's giving him this situation of the world is created, so we can realize that we're like the hand cut off, just sitting there, rather than the hand should see that the other hand is just feeding the mouth, going to the stomach, and the stomach can nourish the whole body by digestion. So similarly, in this material world, if we are able to actually control our senses and get off the bodily platform and serve the Lord and actually make him enjoy, that's like the hand serving, and automatically we ourselves and everyone will enjoy the most, because that's our constitutional position, is to help the Lord enjoy, and it's for his sense gratification. And because we're part and parcel of the Lord, his sense gratification is ultimately our best sense gratification. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then Vidura asks some questions about the material world and its relationship with the world. Like, this is the most in the start, the 7th chapter we're in now. How can the Lord be unaffected by the world if he's motivated to make it? That's one question. Like, you're saying the Lord is not affected all by this material world, but he wants to make it. So why? And so Maitreya gives a nice example. Like a king, if he goes into a prison house, the king is not affected by the prison house, right? Like Jimmy, if you're a king and you're in prison, and if someone thinks that the king is in prison, isn't that ridiculous? Like, he's just it's like he has bad subjects, so he needs to build a prison, but he's not affected by the prison. He can go and check it out, and he can easily walk out any second he wants. But the prisoners, they can't walk out. If you're a prisoner inside, then and you think the king is on your same level, that's just your foolishness. So if we're in this material world and we think that Krishna is on our same level, or we're on the same level as him, it's just foolishness. And then he asked the second question. It's kind of, I was reading the Unveiling His Lotus Feet by, what's that Prabhu's name? He makes Surrender Unto Me as well. He studies a lot. Buri Jan Prabhu. And he said there was 3 questions, but for me it seemed just like essentially 2 questions that the second 2 questions are like very closely related. And basically the question was, how can a soul who's not a part of this, uncontaminated completely by this material world, completely separate from it, Satchidananda, and guided by the super soul, how can he like make mistakes and be an illusion? And it doesn't make any sense. And so the nice answer that Maitreya gives, or maybe let's ask the crowd. So does that make sense? Does that question make sense? We're souls, right? You can't, like Krishna says in the 2nd chapter, you can't burn it. You can't wet it with water. The wind can't blow it away. It's beyond all these different layers. These are just like kind of layers of all the different elements, and then your false ego ultimately, and all these different subtle and gross things. So how is it actually affected? Raise your hands, please. Don't all shout out at once. Yeah, that's true. So how can a Satchidananda soul be unable to remember its identity and become miserable making mistakes? How is that possible? Do we remember what the verse is? Hare Krishna, Bhakti Kaala. Thank
Krishna. You. We have the minute independence of free will.
That's a good point. We're minute, and we have some minute independence. So even though we have Super Soul as our constant companion, he's there to actually guide us at every second. Isn't it like kind of sad that practically all the unlimited souls in the material world are like, they have that resource, the most perfect guide, the best friend, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. That's who Krishna is. And he's waiting. He's just like waiting there looking at us like, I can fix everything. Like, I can help you. I'm waiting. And we just, no, my way, my way, my way. And so that's not good. And so the suffering is actually, it's like illusory. We're minute, so we're put into illusion. And because we're in illusion, we think that we're something like we're not. Like in the example that was given in the shloka in the Bhagavatam is that you see the moon, like right now, even you can see the light. Like I can see those lights like reflected off the nice shiny floor that, not sure who's cleaning it, but I'm glad it's still shiny at least. Jacob was cleaning it here, so we miss him. I hope he comes back soon. And so if you put a bunch of water, like let's say it floods and our roof is not like very good, and all the water comes in here and floods, sometimes it happens. Then if you see water and it moves, it kind of looks like maybe that light is shaking. And someone, if they're illusion and thinking that was the actual light and thought it was shaking, would be freaked out. Similarly to how the moon quivers when it's like, and you see it in a reflection on a pool of water. The moon is not quivering, the moon's not moving. Our soul, our self is completely situated away from this, but because of our identification with the body, because of our misidentification of the moon with its reflection, then there's an illusion of suffering. Oh no, why I should be completely perfectly round and like this, but I'm like, why am I shaking? I shouldn't be shaking. And that causes this kind of, that's how we get into suffering. And so what is a cure for this suffering? Do you remember what that shloka was? Jimmy, what's the cure for suffering?
I was thinking devotional service.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Or thinking about Krishna.
Can you maybe, okay, how do you do, what's the recommended way for doing devotional service?
For devotional service, chanting Hare Krishna.
Chanting Hare Krishna. I like it. That goes really well with the shloka that was coming closer to this verse. Ashesha sanklesha shaman vidate gunanuvada shavanam murare. So it's saying that to get rid of the ashesha, the unlimited sanklesha, miserable kleshas mean like painful situations. Shamam, to get rid of them, vidate is by guna anuvad. Guna anu, which means all the different qualities, names, pastimes in entourage and paraphernalia. Shravanam murare, hearing and chanting about them of murare. Who's murare?
Krishna.
Yeah, murare means one that holds the flute, right? Or flute. Killer of the Murari demon. Oh, Murari, yeah. Murali is the holder of the flute, right? Yeah, okay, Murari, the killer of the Murari. And so simply by chanting and hearing the transcendental name form of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited material, miserable conditions. Therefore, what to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord? And so Maitreya is giving him this answer. And now Vidura wants to know more details. So he begins to ask, thank you. He begins to ask about more details. So in this shloka, he's talking, okay, tell me about Tantra. Tell me about Shankya. Tell me about, devotional service. Tell me about knowledge. And so we've got maybe 20 more minutes. Maybe we'll go through Tantra and Sankhya, and then we'll be done. So Tantra, Prabhupada mentions, Tantra is sometimes misunderstood to be the black spiritual science of materialistic persons engaged in sense gratification, which that is like a lot of these words in devotional service that we're learning when we read Prabhupada's books in the Bhakti Shastras and the Vedic Shastras in general. A lot of words in specific contexts can have different kinds of meanings. Like even in the Bhagavad Gita, you hear about karma. Krishna says himself karma in different chapters, but it means different things. Like it can refer to karma mishra bhakti, or it can refer to karma kanda activity, which are two similar but different things, which have their specific, you have to kind of know these specific details. Otherwise you may get confused. So similar, tantra is a word that's thrown around a lot. Oh, those tantric yogis, that's a common thing. But in general, what a tantra is an agama shastra, it's some scripture, which is specifically describing more practical techniques. It's like a practical scripture. So, whereas sometimes the scripture will just say, you should worship the Lord. But a tantra will say, this is how you do it. And there's different tantras based on the modes of material nature, and there's transcendental tantras. So the main, Prabhupada says here, there's Tantra here, the Tantra means the science of devotional service compiled by Sri Narada Muni. So there's a scripture called Narada Pancharatna. So Pancharatna and means, Ratna means night, Pancha means 5. And it's talking about how Narada Muni had 5 nights to hear from Lord Shiva, I think. And Lord Shiva is explaining to him all these different things. And this is actually the basis for all our activities in devotional service. And so like the different prescribed rules and how to actually worship the Lord, like how to wake up in the morning, how to bathe, what paraphernalia to use when worshiping the deity, how to perform achman, what mantras to use, what do the mantras mean, how do you get initiated into the mantras, what is the different things. And so this is very important because the scriptures can tell us something to do, but especially if we're a little dull, like everyone in Kali Yuga is Manda Sumanda. We don't have good Sumedasa. We can't really understand exactly what to do. The more detailed an explanation can be, the easier it is that we don't have to get lost in our weak intelligence. We can just perform it and do it and get the benefit. And so these are very good. But then as Prabhupada understood, sometimes there's also these black tantras. And like you can hear in Atma Tattva Prabhu. Does everyone know who Atma Tattva Prabhu is? He lives in Australia now. He's like, I've just been watching the Prabhupada memory DVDs. He's on the first one. He can like talk, like when he's imitating what Prabhupada did, like in his memories of Prabhupada, it like feel like he's like imbibing Prabhupada in that. He'd be a good actor to like make some play. But anyways, he has a whole, it's like an unreleased biography of what he did before he met Prabhupada. And it's a lot of getting into these tamasic tantras. And, they just explain all these like gruesome rituals to get mystic powers and to get different like blessings and things, or to be able to curse someone. And, one thing in there was saying, like this guy that was telling Amatafa, he's like, how do you get these mystic powers? How do you like force yourself to do, because they were doing a very gruesome ritual at that time. How could you do this? What brought you to do this? And the guy just looked at him. He said, to do what no one else can do, you have to be willing to do what no one else can do. Which is also, it's good advice for us. If we want devotional service, then, we have to be willing to perform. No one else really wants, most people in the material world don't want to do devotional service, so they're not going to be able to do pure devotional service to the Lord in Vrindavan or in Nitya Navadvip. So we have to be willing to do that. And so he tried all these different tantric practices. Some are like how to entice a ghost to like help you. Like there was this one just sideshow guy that he had enticed these baby ghosts to like do parlor tricks. And somehow he knew the way to like keep them happy, that they would, when he would lay something on the ground and then like they would move it and it would look like it was magically moving or something like that. And everyone, oh my gosh, they would like give donations to the guy. And, these tantrics describe different ways to sacrifice people to goddess Kali. It needs to be on the Amavasya night. It needs to be like all these specific ways, and, how you should do it. Like we even hear in the Bhagavatam, they understand these tamasic scriptures when we're hearing about, what's his name? Not Bharat. Jada Bharat. Jada Bharat, he's, Jimmy, you know the story of Jada Bharat? Yeah, so the story that I'm talking about when he's about to get sacrificed? So they saw him because he had, when you get good karma, you get auspicious bodily features in bodily proportions. So people that know this can like tell, but just by looking at someone, like what their karma is. And so they saw Jada Bharat and said, wow, this is like a great specimen. He has like a perfectly proportioned body. Let's take him and offer him as a sacrifice to goddess Kali, and then we'll get like a lot of benefit. And even if there's one little mistake in your offering, like I was saying before about the smritis versus the shrutis, some of these tantric rituals also, if there's like even a little mistake, then it can completely backfire. Like there's a story of It's like how to like just take things, like this king was like out hunting, he accidentally cut his finger off, and then his servant's like, oh, that's very good, it's the mercy of the Lord. Like the whole time the servant's just like, oh, it's the mercy of the Lord. And then the king's like, how could you possibly say that? And the king ends up getting very like frustrated with the servant. I can't remember exactly what happens, but it ends up happening a similar situation to Jadabharat, that the king is then going to be sacrificed, but it's found that his finger got cut off. And he's like, no, he only has 9 fingers. He's not suitable for sacrifice, so we can't do it. So the king actually gets relieved. Then he practically realizes, okay, yeah, my servant was right. I shouldn't have chastised him or whatever he did. And Prabhupada mentions in one room conversation, there's some tantric shastras that they all kinds of gruesome things. And so we shouldn't, sometimes there's devotees that will preach different things, or kind of, I don't know if they could call them devotees, to try to attract people, like, oh, you do some of this and you get some mystic power, you get the ability to, enjoy for a lot longer or something like that. And, you should stay celibate, but then, I don't know, it's like bridge preaching, but the devotees are living on the bridge. But real spiritual pleasure is beyond the material senses. Like you do these tantric rituals, you can, they have like this tantric sex and these different things like that. But it said that the sukham adyantikam yatad atendriya grayam, and that set of shlokas in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where it's talking about the person who's attained the perfection of yoga. And there's that famous picture of, like, on the back of perfection of yoga, the old ones with Prabhupada like meditating, and it's saying how the actually self-realized soul, he's experiencing like this, amazing sukham, this happiness, which is completely beyond atendriya. Indriya means senses, so it's beyond these senses, these gross material senses. So if you do stuff to help yourself indulge more in your material senses, it's completely the opposite of actual yoga. Yoga means to reel in the senses, control the senses under the control of the self. It's like if I want to go to Coney Island, which is south, but I get on the Uptown A train, I can never expect a good result. So similarly, if devotees are trying to preach like this, or if anyone's trying to do like that, it's just guaranteed that they're not going to get the proper result. They're going to go north when they want to be going south. They're going to be going west when they want to be going east. You can't, it's not like you just can't go. If I turn this way and I walk that way, I'm going away from the altar. The idea is to get closer to Krishna. And so these senses, they're covered by matter. So we need to purify them if we want to actually enjoy our spiritual senses. Sarvopadi vinir muktam tat parat vena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchite. All these upadis of designations, that I'm a man, I'm an American, I'm white, I've graduated from this university, this is what I do. All these things are different upadis, or false designations that are just more or less a manifestation of the false ego. And I have to ultimately purify, like, what actually am I? Well, if I'm not all this, what am I? So to get purified from that means tapo divyam, yena putarka surya sattvam. To get purified, to become completely pure, we have to do tapo divyam, divine austerity, which that's in this chapter, about 10 verses before this verse. Vidura is explaining this with Maitreya. By serving the feet of the spiritual master, one is enabled to develop transcendental ecstasy in the service of the personality of Godhead, who is the enemy of the Manu demon, whose service vanquishes one's material distresses. Persons whose austerity is meager can hardly obtain the service of pure devotees. So we need to be willing to do a little austerity, like I was saying before. To do what no one else can do, you have to be willing to do what no one else can do. So the more austerity that we take in devotional service, and that being said, we should take it in the proper way. Sometimes we can take too much austerity, or austerity in the wrong proportions, and that will disturb our service. But we should be able to take austerity, and the more service that we are able to take on, we should take it up to our eligibility. And that that'll give us the power, the potency to actually serve our spiritual master. It's like we want to wield the weapon of spiritual knowledge. Knowledge is heavy. Guru means heavy. So to wield something heavy, if we want that, then we have to have spiritual strength. And so that spiritual strength is coming from this austerity. And so that austerity is this austerity of serving the pure devotees, gives us that strength. And so pure devotees engage 100% in glorying the Supreme Lord, who is the Lord of demigods and controller of all living entities. So after doing that austerity, then we get completely purified. Brahma Bhuta Prashanatma na shochichi na kangshichi. We don't want anything. We don't have any desires for this material sense gratification. And all we want is, we have loba for bhakti. Mad bhaktim labate param. That really, once we have that, that means we've purified our senses. Then on that platform, we can enjoy on the spiritual platform, enjoying spiritual senses. So that's the real point of Tantra, is to bring us to that. And of course, the Narada Pancharatna explains all these things, like even building the altar and everything. It's all details that are in different tantric practical books like that. And in this verse, it's talking not only about Tantra, but it's talking about Sankhyasia, of analytical studies. So Sankhyasia means to count. So does everyone know how to count? Jimmy, you know how to count? So in the third canto, which we're in right now, you'll be happy to know that eventually we'll get to the Sankhya of Kapila, which Prabhupada mentions in the purport here. And that'll be very exciting when we get there. We've got a few more chapters to go. There's like 30 something chapters in the third canto, and we're only on 7. So we'll have to be a little patient, but a little taste there. Maybe we can go. So Sankhya means to count, and different sages have counted how the different elements of reality interact and are amalgamated and are analyzed. So how Kapila does it is he says there's 25. So maybe we can go through the 25. Can anyone give any, what is one of the 25 aspects, if you had to divide reality into 25 things, what would be some of those things? Anyone can start with anything. What are the 5 material elements? So 5, yeah, what is that?
5 material elements are earth, water, fire, ether.
Air, and ether. Okay, that's 5. So that's 5. Okay, we only get to 25 though.
False ego, mind.
False ego, mind.
Intellect.
Intellect. Okay, 8.
The 5 subtle elements. So taste, touch,
Okay, yeah.
smell, sight. The 5, because the 5 gross material elements, and then the 5 subtle material elements.
10 so that's 10 3. We have 13.
13.
Okay, very good. Yeah, because you have fire, but what is fire if you can't see it? Like sight is actually something. It's different than fire, but they're interrelated. And if there's no sight, then there's no fire. So it's, yeah, we heard about that in the second canto, and in the third canto maybe a little bit, how there's different demigods related to, there's a demigod related to fire, and he helps you see it when there's actual fire, when there's sense. Okay, I gave a hint of the next. So we have 13. We're down. We need 12 more. Okay, Tosi can cheat because he's a fully self-realized learned scholar of all these things.
Well, I think also the different senses.
Yeah. Okay. So different senses. He gave the hint. Now, what senses do we have? Because your fire and sight. Like that's the hint. What do you need with fire and sight? What matches with those? Of your senses, you have senses like organs.
Eyeballs.
Eyes. Okay. Yeah, that's one of your. It's called knowledge gathering senses. So they're not 14. 14. We need 11 more, or 9 more. Wait. So we're getting to 25. 11 more. Yeah.
Okay. So we have 13, right? So then the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, right? Ears, right? Like taste.
Okay.
You add that, and then the 5
ears, eyes, skin, tongue,
and then the 5 acting
nose.
senses.
Senses of action.
Sense of action.
So what can someone enunciate the 5 action organs?
It's the hands, right?
Hands, what's 1?
Legs.
Legs, 2.
Speech.
Your tongue.
Tongue,
Or
yeah.
your,
And then
your saying, yeah.
Evacuation. And then
Evacuation.
reproduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Okay, so now we're up to 19. Wait.
I think it was 13 plus 10, right? 23.
23. Oh, 23. Yeah, you're right. 23. 2 left. Well, let me ask a question. So we talked about the 5 gross elements, fire, and we talked about how do you see that with your eyes, and what's happening? It's the sight. So those are 3 things. But what is actually seeing it? Yeah, say it on the mic. So our unlimited
Soul.
the soul. That's right. So that's 20. That's the 24th element, because this is one of the mistakes of modern sciences. They can reduce everyone down to machines. Your eyes like a machine, your brain is like a machine. When you see something, though, they don't understand what is the experience. That's something that's eluding science. There's no experience of sight that in a machine. It's just a camera connected to a disc that connected to a screen. But ultimately, we're looking at the screen. You know, if someone's looking on the screen out in internet land, the actual soul, something is seeing that. And even if you think your eyes are like seeing something and then projecting it onto your brain, which there's this weird way that your eye sees the sight upside down, and then it projects it in the back of your head, and somehow your brain has to like reorient it right. But what is it reorienting it for? And so that's actually the consciousness, the soul. That's the amazing thing. That's what we are. And then there's one more, which I hope everyone can remember this one. We should always remember this one and never forget this one. If we forget this one, well, I mean, yeah, this is the Lord. You could call it Paramatma. Kapila Dev specifically says the time element is the Lord's personal factor into the material world that's keeping everything together. But you could expand that to the Paramatma, to actually the Supreme Lord, ultimately. Krishna says, Kalosmi, time I am. Yes, Jimmy.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask.
You have 30 seconds.
I heard that Kaala and Paramatma are used as synonyms. So what is the relationship between Kaala, eternal time, and Paramatma, the super soul?
Kaala it's basically the energy of the Lord that's mixing everything together. That it's his influence on the material. We'll hear this later in the section with Kapila Muni. That's what when he's describing these 25 elements. So he's describing time as the Supreme Lord and his specific effect. Maybe we have 50 seconds. I'll try to just pull up the specific verse for you. Fundamental principle. Okay, all these are considered the qualified Brahman, the 24 elements besides the Lord. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. The influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is felt as the time factor, which causes fear of death due to the false ego of the deluded soul who has contacted material nature. You understand that? I'll get to your question, but it causes fear. Okay, I have 4 seconds. My dear mother, O daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, the time factor, as I have explained, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By exhibiting his potencies, he adjusts all these different elements, keeping himself within as the super soul and without as time. So it's like the external manifestation of the Supreme Lord. That's how it's the Supreme Lord. Does that make sense?
So they're different expansions. So Kaala, as the eternal time, is the external manifestation, the external material manifestation of Krishna. And then the Paramatma is the internal manifestation. Is internal, I want to say internal material manifestation. Is that the correct?
Yeah, the super soul is in the material world. He if you see how exactly everything's expanding from Krishna. Everything comes from Krishna. So Krishna to Baladev to the first chapter Vyuha, to the second chapter Vyuha, to Mahavishnu, to the three Purushas, and the third Purusha, Kirjakta Vishnu, he expands himself as the super soul of all living entities. So that's in the material world. In the spiritual world, there's no Kirjakta Vishnu.
I see. Okay, and then I guess we're going overtime now.
So, all right.
So, yeah.
Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. No, he was asking questions. You can ask a question. All right, Kyle always asks questions, and I already answered one of Jimmy's questions.
No, you ask your question, then I'll go.
Okay, so I wanted to ask then, so what is the nature of time, right?
I just described
So
that?
you
It's
you
mixing
described the nature of time, it's the external, but, okay.
It's mixing everything.
It's mixing everything.
And it gives people fear because they're attached to their bodies. They think due to false ego that their bodies are themselves, and that time element will ultimately destroy their bodies. So time element is just this thing that's destroying everything, gradually mixing it and destroying it until there's pralaya, complete destruction.
Okay.
Which laya means that which everything is dissolved into, which is related also to music.
And then what is the relationship with the Paramatma, with Kaala? I know that you're saying the external manifestation. The
I already said the
manifestation,
verse. I don't know how to
but-
explain more than
But
what
like,
the
how
verse
does
said.
Paramatma interact with Kaala?
Just by his it's just his influence.
His
It's
influence.
that you'll have to realize by chanting Hare Krishna.
Okay.
And I'm sure that will be an amazing movie, amazing realization when the Lord enters into your consciousness and explains that to you. But it's
Okay.
something I read the shloka. I don't know how to actually explain more than that. I'm sorry to my insufficient realization. Maybe Prabhuji.
Oh, sometimes we can say that the time is like the practically showing what is the desire of the Lord. Because
Wonderful.
whatever the Lord wants to happen, it will happen, and through which energy He is achieving this through the time. The time is practically doing what the Lord wants.
Yeah, and ultimately that it gets manifested as Rudra, anger.
Just like I was reading recently this book by Austerity Prabhu. He was explaining, the book is called The Power of Time or something like this. So he was explaining how, there is appropriate time for everything. Like you have to eat lunch at a certain period, and if you don't do it, you get indigestion. Or if you want to have kids, you have to do it young, otherwise
Yeah.
at older age it becomes
Weak kid,
problematic.
yeah.
So this is it. The time is setting the rules for everything, and if you don't follow it, this is how Paramatma is guiding our lives. If you go to bed late, you have diseases. This kind of thing.
Okay, last question by Dr. Kyle.
It's okay. We can
No,
go in
please,
for shots.
we can talk about it just for 1 minute.
Well, my
kill us.
question's like one of those questions that I've been asking a lot lately, so maybe you don't want to hear this one. But you were talking about, we're enjoying materially, right? And like that's not real enjoyment. And the only way to really enjoy is devotional service. What if devotional service is not enjoyable?
That means we're not doing devotional service. It said I just recently heard from my Guru Maharaj, how do you know if you're, where did I read this? I can't remember where I heard this, but how do you know you're actually pleasing the spiritual master? Is that you're feeling more and more enlivened by your devotional service, and then you want to get more deeper into it. And so it's not that
I don't want to get
devotional
deeper in
service-
trash.
It's not that the devotional service is like not enjoyable. It's that like our consciousness is contaminated, and we're not able to pull out the essence of that. And so like, yeah, so if you're like saying like, yeah, I'm getting fried out from like taking all the trash out or like cleaning the bathroom or having to like cook so much or do whatever, sometimes that means our consciousness is not necessarily in the proper place. And so if we want to actually change our consciousness and it's not in the proper place to do that, the best thing is to hear from senior devotees or to chant Hare Krishna. That's like a very easy way to purify our consciousness. Arjuna, do you have a comment on that? Please. So yeah, it's constantly our things. That's what I was saying about austerity. We shouldn't take too much austerity in Krishna consciousness if it goes against our service. But when we have the adhikar to actually take austerity, like Prabhupada was doing everything at 70 years old, cleaning, cooking, and and basically wiping their butts and everything for all his disciples. He was going through so much austerity, we can't even really imagine what it is. 2 heart attacks, coming with $5 that couldn't even transfer into actual money. And yeah, exactly. So if we're not in that, then it's also, our devotional service should just be to the level of adhikar. And actually, if we hear nicely, um, it can transform our experience. Whatever we're doing, like we can hear about how Jayananda Prabhu, the Prabhupada disciple, he was doing all these like menial tasks, but because his consciousness was situated in the right perspective, he was completely blissful to the point where people would see him and just be amazed, and everyone just loved interacting with him because he was so firmly fixed in the proper devotional perspective. Because we can constantly doing devotional service in the wrong mood, or like even like chanting inattentively and everything, that can put us into a more where we see as, oh, this is just like my regular job, and I'm expecting, like, I'm not making as much as the karmis that are out doing whatever, so I feel like I'm getting like gypped by the Lord. But like when I was quitting my job, I was explaining to my boss that I'm getting a better boss with a bigger salary, and there's no way you can match it. And that's ultimately what's true. If we're it just depends on how our consciousness, how we're approaching it. It's Krishna consciousness. um I guess there's maybe a little more to be said to that, but that's a problem with many devotees, most devotees. Yeah, and so yeah, Arjuna, we'll can talk about it over prasadam and throughout the day.
Maybe I can add one point that once His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj was giving class, so I had asked a question based on conflict between devotees. So first question he asked me was, "Are you reading Prabhupada's books?" I said, "Yes, Maharaj, I'm reading Prabhupada's books." Then again he asked, "Are you reading Srila Prabhupada's books?" So basically his point was that when we do a regular strong sadhana, that actually helps us to see Krishna in different aspects of our lives. So if we cannot see Krishna in service, if we cannot see Krishna in even deity worship, yeah, but if we cannot see, then Prabhupada said, if you don't read my books or hear my lectures, you'll feel that deities are a burden. So basically, it's if we have to start seeing Krishna through in all different aspects of our life, and that only happens when we have strong hearing, reading and hearing. So this is what.
So in other words, you're making the
add.
point that, are you reading Prabhupada's books? You can answer yes, and then you answer again. But are you really reading it deeply
Yeah.
and getting absorbed into it, which is a completely different quality? And yeah, that's true. If we get absorbed in our Shravanam and Kirtanam, then that can completely transform, like, touchstone or Chintamani, all the rest of our service. Like my Guru Maharaj says, if you chant good rounds and read nicely, then all the services you do the most effective, the most productive, the most efficient. Like but if you give bad rounds, then every service you do just takes more and more time, and you don't. Because Krishna says, "Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam enamam upyantite." If you actually serve him with attention, especially during japa and hearing about him, then that'll transform your consciousness. He'll give you whatever intelligence you need to do his service. Because the whole time we're praying, please give me service. So then he actually gives you dadami buddhi yogam. He gives you that perfect intelligence to how to actually expertly do whatever service that we're doing.
And that's why Srila Prabhupada when he came to the West, he could actually do everything on his own. Because he could see Krishna in practically everything, all his spiritual masters mostly. And I had a question. The question is, at what point in a sadhaka stage should he venture into reading about Radha Krishna's pastimes?
His Holiness Shiva Maharaj has a wonderful book called Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, which describes elaborately the different stages of devotional service that Rupa Goswami defines in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, from Shraddha to Prema. And he describes how there's different types of hearing of Radha Krishna's pastimes. And so just hearing occasionally while you're reading through some books is okay at any point. Prabhupada distributed Krishna book to everybody. He wanted that to distribute to everyone, and he was very happy, and that's very good. But maybe specifically trying to like take different books and hear about the very intimate pastimes is very dangerous for the neophyte. And just a very quick, concise answer is saying once you get closer to the stage of nishta in devotional service is when you should. That's when it's more appropriate to focus on it. Otherwise, it's not so appropriate. Hare Krishna. Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot.